Good evening, America, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, and reporting to you, as always, from the nation's capital and the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. You know this Wired to Fish Coffee is the official coffee of Just the News, and by the way, just for the next couple of days, there is a special offer. If you go buy some coffee there today, you can get an autographed book of my latest book, the one on the Russia collusion-Ukraine scandal called Fallout, autographed along with some great coffee and a huge discount. All you got to do is use the promo code JUSTNEWS at checkout. Go check out that offer. It's pretty exciting. All right. It has been a number that we have tried at Just the News to get since the moment Donald Trump came into office. And today, just a little while ago, we got it here at Just the News. The number of people deported in the first 60 days under President Trump, 100,000 illegal aliens forcibly deported from the United States. Another 110,000 have been arrested anew. So those are people not yet deported, but waiting to get into the deportation process. That brings down the backlog quite a bit. It's the first time we've got those numbers. If you go over to justthenews.com right now, you'll see exactly what's happened there. And we'll have more details throughout the night as we press the administration for a few more details. But for the first time, we've got those numbers. And, it's good because Congress was roaring. There was a lot of things going on today until it stopped. Earlier today, there's been a announcement that Congress will adjourn for the rest of this week over a dispute over whether young mothers and young fathers in Congress can vote by proxy and not have to show up for Congress when they're taking care of their young children. Anna Paulina Luna has pushed the issue. She sided with, got Democrats to vote in favor of this, thwarting Speaker Mike Johnson's efforts to, maybe put it aside. And everything's a little bit in chaos. We're going to get caught up to that in a little bit. In fact, one of my favorite members of Congress, she always brings the news. Harriet Hageman's going to be here in just a second. We'll get to her. But first, let me turn to my extraordinary co-host, Amanda Head. A lot of other things you're watching today, aren't you?
Indeed, yes. There is a story that we have been following in New York regarding corrections facilities. Guys, I want to make sure I get the facts of this case right, so if you can scroll up there. Sometimes it's a little whirlwind around here. Oh.
All right. We're going to get there.
There we go. All right. Yeah. So this is a case out of New York State that we have been tracking for a while, and it deals with the ongoing strike of corrections officers since February over what they say are tough working conditions and forced overtime. Well, Just the News obtained a memo from the New York Department of Corrections today, which states plans to release prisoners en masse as the strike continues. The memo from the Department of Corrections Commissioner states, in view of the current staffing crisis and in order to have the appropriate balance between the safety and well-being of those working and residing in DOCCS correctional facilities and public safety, it is appropriate that I, as Commissioner, exercise my authority to move individuals from the Department's general confinement facilities into residential treatment outcount status. Now, the memo also states that Class BE violent felonies, sex offenses, and other crimes will not be eligible for release, but they do expect, quote, large numbers of inmates to qualify. The release will only apply to inmates who have less than 110 days until their scheduled release date and who also have an approved residence. And how about some more news on cutting government waste, fraud, and abuse? That is one of the key issues, of course, that the Trump administration has been focusing on in these first few months, and a key campaign promise made by President Trump, and they seem to be delivering on some of that agenda as well. Take EPA Administrator and friend of the show, Lee Zeldin. He made an announcement yesterday about saving more of our taxpayer money, and you will not believe what it is being spent on. Take a look.
If you were to visit the museum located here at EPA headquarters in D.C., you would learn a lot about the road to environmental justice and climate change. This museum claims EPA pursues its mission by advancing environmental justice, equity, and civil rights compliance. A timeline of key events conveniently omits any mention of President Trump's first administration. I'm currently standing inside of this museum, which was built and curated by the Biden administration with $4 million in taxpayer dollars. As if this wasn't enough of a price tag to fill a room the size of an apartment, this shrine to environmental justice and climate change cost the American taxpayer $600,000 to operate annually.
The shrine is right. And he went on to announce that they were closing that museum, a museum that only had 1,909 external visitors come through in the last 9 months. Isn't that symbolic of government waste, fraud, and abuse, John? I know that this is something that's catching the airwaves because of its stark wastefulness.
Yeah, well, listen, every agency should look under every rock. There's probably billions still to be found, and the process is just beginning. Really remarkable. All right, we're very lucky to be joined, as I said at the top of the show, by Congresswoman Harriet Hageman from the great state of Wyoming. Congresswoman, great to have you on the show. So much to talk about. I want to start with the deportation numbers. That's a pretty large number for the first 60 days, about 1,200 to 1,500 a day being deported. Your thoughts on that and the fact that we have a lot more secure border than we had just a few months ago?
Promises made and promises kept. And I think that what it demonstrates is that when President Trump ran for office, he told the American public what he was going to do. They put him back in office, made him the 47th president of the United States, and he's gone in and he has done exactly what he said. What I think is really important about this is because there has been so much focus on the border security, national security, that sort of thing. I think that number one, you're seeing people self-deport, but also I think that some of the criminals and the crimes that we've been dealing with over the last couple of years, those criminals are running scared right now. And I think that you're going to see statistically significant decreases in crimes in some of our cities because these people are trying to avoid the attention of the federal government. So I think all around it's a win-win situation.
I certainly hope that crime does go down. Congresswoman, President Trump had a flood the zone offense type scheme when he came into office, signing EO after EO after EO. And I know Congress the plan was for Congress to come behind that, tighten the screws, make sure it's locked in via legislation. But now, after today, it seems like things have come to maybe not a screeching halt, but a slight screaming halt. How does that affect President Trump's agenda, and how quickly can you kick things back in?
Well, we need to get back on the agenda. We need to get back here in Washington, D.C. We need to be on the floor. We need to be debating the bills, and we need to be passing them so that we can pursue the agenda that he laid out for the American people. So I'm disappointed that we're in this situation. At the same time, I would assume that these issues are being worked out. I'm not a supporter of proxy voting. I don't think that it is appropriate. I think that we need to be here in Washington representing our constituents, doing what we said that we would do. If you were to go ask 99 out of 100 people on the street, what is it that members of Congress do? And they would say they vote on bills. And if we're not going to be here doing that, then I don't think that we are actually representing them the way that we should be. So they need to get this worked out. We need to get back in session so that we can be pursuing the agenda that not only President Trump, but many of us laid out when we were running for re-election last year. So it's time to move on.
Yeah, it is important. And the people want the people's business done in the people's house. So that's important. Congressman, I want to talk about one of the things you're working on. You're a big champion of the Second Amendment. You come from a great Second Amendment state. The Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act that you're working and helping to shepherd through Congress, a big opportunity. If you get licensed in one state, you can carry in all states. Tell us about it and why it's so important.
Well, that's exactly right, John. And what it does is it just makes sure that we can continue to exercise our Second Amendment rights, and that if I have either a concealed carry permit or I come from a constitutional state, a concealed carry state, then when I go into another state that might have restrictions, I will not be at risk of being arrested or being subjected to their laws. So this is just a common sense approach to making sure that we're protecting everyone's constitutional rights, including the Second Amendment.
Well, in this country is majority constitutional carry. I think we're up to 27 or 28 states at this point. What do you anticipate will be the pushback, though, in blue states? Because no doubt, and especially in places like Los Angeles and New York and Chicago, they are going to be pushing back.
Well, I think that's just it. I think that's exactly what you're going to see. If we're successful in getting this through the Senate, then I think that what you'll first see is you will see lawsuits filed against it from those states arguing that they have the right to restrict gun use and access. And I think that this particular Supreme Court has been quite clear in recognizing that the Second Amendment is not some kind of a secondary right, that it is comparable to the First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, etc. And so they've never been willing to actually act as though this Second Amendment doesn't deserve the recognition that our forefathers expected it to. So this would most likely play out in the courts, but ultimately I think we will prevail.
Yeah. Democrats are always quick to try to put their bodies in front of allowing people to enjoy the Second Amendment rights that the Founding Fathers gave us. But then they often get caught in their own hypocrisy. In the last 24 hours, Senator Cory Booker's staffer By the way, Senator Cory Booker, a major proponent of restricting gun rights all across this country, has signed on to all sorts of different efforts to restrict that. His staffer was caught bringing a gun into the Capitol, wasn't authorized to bring it there, wasn't complying with the gun control rules of the Capitol. Just want to get your thought on Democrats. They often are for regulating other people's, but then they don't do their own.
Well, you know, it's often said that if Democrats didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. And I think that that's just a classic example of that old adage.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you about the work that DOGE is doing. I have never seen people so apoplectic about saving money for the American people in my life, but DOGE is identifying a number of areas that I know you have focused on with regard to that waste, fraud, and abuse. Tell us about it.
So I'm with you. I'm actually quite stunned at the response to the information that Elon Trump and the DOGE team are exposing. And I think that what this tells you is there's much more behind the scenes than perhaps we initially thought. We know that there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse of these agencies. I was listening to your introduction with Secretary Lee Zeldin talking about a museum that was created with millions of dollars and nobody's even interested in going to, in addition to which it's scientifically and factually invalid. So you've got that kind of a waste of money, which the vast majority of people, Republican, Independent, Democrat in this country, don't want to spend any more money on. But what you figure out is that a lot of these agencies, when they are giving grants and money to various NGOs, non-governmental organizations, the kinds of things that they are supporting is that oftentimes filtering that money back into the coffers of the Democrat Party. And they're also pursuing an agenda that the vast majority of us, again, don't want. These are not things that could pass Congress. We would never have voted to fund the specific programs that have been exposed, say, with USAID, but they do this and they pursue what I consider very toxic ideology that they're spreading around the world by taking these agencies and having them fund programs in other countries that those countries don't even want and are contrary to their conservative values. So that's what's happening. Is I think the reason that you see such caterwauling and screaming is that this is potentially going to upset what has been the apple cart for quite some time, which is funding programs, agencies, policies that we don't want, the American people don't want, the countries that we're sending the money into don't want, yet it furthers the radical leftist ideology and agenda. And that's why I think you're seeing the upset that you are.
Yeah, no doubt. Congresswoman, we only have about a minute left. I just want to ask real quickly, Jim Jordan today sent the appropriators language saying, hey, it's time to get these pieces of legislation through to rein in wayward judges. You're a very accomplished lawyer. Your thoughts on these temporary restraining orders that are propping up everywhere? They're going out like Halloween candy on Halloween. Tell us a little bit about what you think should be done.
So one of the things, we could talk about this issue for hours, but I want people to go and look at Rule 65 of the Rules of Civil Procedure. Specifically, it requires that for any injunction or TRO that is issued, the requesting party must post a bond that would cover the costs associated with that injunction if it's ultimately determined to be invalid. I do believe that most of these injunctions, if not all, will eventually go by the wayside because they do violate the law. And what I want to know is why we're not getting the bonds that are required by the rules. And I think that if we did, it would stop a lot of this nonsense. For one, it would be way too costly for these judges to be issuing nationwide injunctions. And number two, I think it would really focus on who these individuals are, what standing they have. And I think that it would force them to actually put up money to support and defend what it is that they're doing, which is the very purpose of Rule 65. We need to be exercising that right. These courts need to be imposing substantial bonds if they're going to be issuing these kinds of injunctions.
That's a great idea, and one I think that's going to gain a lot of popularity with the American public. Congresswoman, as always, you're always on the front line of so many of the most important issues affecting America. Great to have you on the show tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, great honor to have you. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but we're going to stay in Congress for another segment. When we come back, we're going to be joined by one of my favorites, Wisconsin Congressman Tom Tiffany. He always brings important news, and he's got something to talk about with the Supreme Court election in his home state tonight. It's election night in Wisconsin. Who knew that? We'll be right back after these messages. Hey folks, are you a yo-yo dieter? You diet, you lose weight, and then you gain it back plus a few extra, right? You know how that goes. You lose it again and you regain it. It's a bad cycle, right? It's dangerous, actually. Studies show that yo-yo dieting can increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and other health problems. It's a real concern. Breaking free of your yo-yo diet pattern is a main reason doctors created Lean. Lean is a supplement, not an injection, and you don't need a prescription for it. The science behind Lean is impressive. It's studied natural ingredients, target weight loss in 3 powerful ways. Lean helps maintain healthy blood sugar, that's important. It helps control appetite, that's important. And it helps burn fat by converting fat into energy. Listen, if you're tired of losing weight and gaining it all back, if you want to lose meaningful weight at a healthy pace, Lean was created just for you. Let me get you started with 20% off when you enter JustNews20 at TakeLean.com. That's the code JustNews20 at TakeLean.com to save 20%. Go check it out.
Welcome back, everybody. There are a few important elections going on tonight that will have some pretty major ramifications for the country. We have the special elections for congressional seats down in Florida, and we also have a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin that has even attracted the attention of Elon Musk, who said that the outcome of the election is extremely important and would affect, quote, the entire destiny of humanity. So joining us now to break that down and why it is so important, Wisconsin Congressman and one of our favorites on this show, Tom Tiffany. Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Good to join you, Amanda. Why do you make me follow the great Harriet Hageman? How am I supposed to follow that act?
You are just as great.
We
just have a double header.
You're gonna be fine.
It's perfect. I love it. It's a double header of equal greatness. Sir, it seems like obviously President Trump won Wisconsin. It's a swing state. Did Republicans, are they showing up?
Yeah, that's the question tonight. So you look at my district in northern and western Wisconsin, we had a county up there, Barron County, that had 96% turnout in November. What happened was people in rural Wisconsin, especially up where I'm at, they outvoted Madison and Milwaukee, which does not always happen. Wow. And is that going to happen in this election? That is the question. Will those Trump voters show up for Judge Brad Schimmel here this Tuesday?
Yeah, that's an important one. How did Elon Musk and all the efforts he made factor into this? It seemed like he brought a lot of energy, particularly late with that event in Green Bay and other things. His role in this as sort of an outside character.
That's going to be really interesting to see, how that balances out, because the left was clearly trying to use him as a boogeyman. I mean, they were running ad after ad. In fact, the liberal candidate in a debate referred to Judge Brad Schimmel, the conservative candidate, as Elon Schimmel, and so they were trying to tie him to Elon Musk, that he would bring him down. What I like about what Elon Musk did is it's kind of like Buffalo. When there's a storm, they turn into the storm and they walk into it. That's exactly what Elon Musk did here in the last week when he came to Green Bay and doubled down saying, we got to win Wisconsin. I give him all the credit for showing up. We're going to find out tonight if it made a difference. There's no doubt. We were trying to nationalize this race from the very beginning because this is about President Trump's agenda. We could lose 2 seats in the House of Representatives if they choose, as Susan Crawford, the liberal candidate, has said, if they choose to redistrict Wisconsin federally, we could lose 2 seats. So this is about the Trump agenda, and Elon Musk clearly knows that, and he's trying to raise that specter to the people of the state of Wisconsin.
Sir, I want to ask you about the issue of election integrity and showing an ID to vote. NPR has reported that only 1 in 10 eligible U.S. voters say that they can't easily show proof of their citizenship. I'm sorry, if you're of voting age these days, you can't do hardly anything. You can't have a Costco membership. You can't obviously buy alcohol or cigarettes or anything. Well, I guess, yeah, cigarettes, I suppose, after 18. But why on earth is this always such an issue?
Well, I don't know why they make this we know why they make this an issue. They don't want election integrity. But this is another one of those 80-20, 70-30 issues. People believe that there should be photo ID in order to have election integrity. And that's one of the things that's at stake in the Supreme Court race here in Wisconsin. I was there a decade ago in the state legislature when we passed photo ID. We were told the sky is going to fall. People are no longer going to be able to vote. We're going to be discriminating as a result of it. Guess what's happened in Wisconsin? More and more people vote election after election. So people are fully engaged in regards to this. The liberal candidate in the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin has said she equates this to a poll tax. You know what's going to happen if she wins with her other three members on the liberal side of the court. If she's successful, photo ID and election integrity are going to go by the wayside in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Now, alongside of tonight's Supreme Court election, there is a ballot referendum, right, to theoretically amend the Wisconsin Constitution to make voter ID part of the Constitution. So these two things are sort of at odds with each other. What do you think happens if the Liberals win? Will they strike down this will of the voters?
That's, once again, it's going to be interesting to do. We saw a liberal Supreme Court justice, in fact, she was the Chief Justice at the time, 5 or 6 years ago, that tried to say that I am not going to abide by a constitutional amendment. And I just wonder if they're going to try to do the same thing. If the liberal wins and the constitutional amendment wins, how are they going to sidestep that? I don't believe they can. But, you know, with the left, the ends justify the means. Who knows?
Sir, I know that it's not necessarily your state, but there are these 2 seats down in Florida that will affect you because it will affect the majority. Democrats are framing it as a referendum on President Trump and on Republicans. Do you agree?
I mean, the referendum on President Trump was held on November 5th, and the American people spoke. And so these are always low turnout elections, Amanda, and we think that we're going to be able to win those races. We're going to welcome 2 new Republicans in probably next week into the House of Representatives, and we need everyone we can get because we got a narrow majority.
Yeah, that's so important. So I want to ask a little bit about the sentiments in Congress over judicial activism. I think a lot of Republicans see what's going on and seeing these TROs, these temporary restraining orders being handed out like a candy at a Halloween party. And they're wondering, hey, when did this start? Why is this starting? And should we rein them in? Jim Jordan today announced a package of bills he's sending from the Judiciary Committee to Appropriations. Tell us a little bit about the sentiments. Is there the will in Congress to rein in these judges?
Sure hope so. Remember a decade ago when then President Obama, after he had lost the House and the Senate, he said, I still have a pen and a phone. And he went on to issue all these executive orders. Well, what you're seeing with these district court judges is they're saying, we got a pen and robes, and we're going to do whatever we want to with these nationwide injunctions that they're issuing. In fact, what is it like in the last 25 years, 2/3 of these nationwide injunctions have been while President Trump has been president. And so clearly they're saying we will do anything to stop the Trump agenda. We don't care that the American people voted for him on November 5th. So we're taking action in judiciary, as you said, in regards to Chairman Jordan. And I hope that we continue to mount the pressure on this. But ultimately, I think the key player on this, John and Amanda, is Chief Justice Roberts. At what point does he say the integrity of the courts in America are jeopardized when you have these rogue judges?
That's a great point.
Sir, very quickly before we go, you are up near our Canadian border. Tomorrow is Liberation Day. I don't know what President Trump is going to announce with regards to the tariffs, but it affects your state. Tell us what you are hoping will transpire.
We need to tell the story. We're the dairy state. You know what the tariffs are in Canada on dairy products into Wisconsin? Over 200%. We just need to tell the story about how these are reciprocal tariffs. The president is saying, if you're going to tariff this much, we're going to tariff you back. He's not creating this problem. He's reacting to what these countries have done, like Canada. So we just have to make sure that we tell the story. And ultimately, if the president is successful, what's going to happen is tariffs to America and around the world are going to come down. Remember, foreign countries, they put out, what was it, last year? It was like 7 times the amount of tariffs in terms of dollar amounts were put on American companies versus products coming into America. It's time that America was being treated fairly, and that's what President Trump is going to try to do with these reciprocal tariffs.
Today, Israel dropped their tariffs, so
That's right.
it is already working, just like the congressman said.
Yeah, terribly unbalanced, but President Trump is obviously trying to remedy it. Wisconsin Congressman Tom Tiffany, thank you so much for being here with us, sir. Great to see you.
You guys have a great night.
Same to you. All right, everybody. Coming up after this, we're going to take a closer look at President Trump's tariff policies that we just mentioned. Are they working, and what can we expect from his tariff announcement tomorrow? We're going to talk to Congressman Riley Moore about that after this.
Hey, it's a new day in America and a new administration in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of excitement and optimism about the future, but the reality is there's a lot of work to do as well, especially when it comes to fixing our broken healthcare system. The truth is that the forces that are responsible for breaking our healthcare system aren't going to simply go away. The challenges our system faces won't disappear overnight. Now more than ever, you need to be prepared. That's where the Wellness Company comes in. Their doctors are medical professionals that you can trust, and their line of prescription medical kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy, as well as your family. Whether it's the medical emergency kit, the contagion kit, the first aid kit, or the travel kit, these prescription kits contain an assortment of life-saving medications and guidebooks to assist in the proper use of these medications. From the flu to strep throat, from COVID to the bird flu, from a trip to the beach to a trip overseas, the Wellness Company has a prescription kit designed to keep you and your family safe. Make America healthy again. Start at home. Do your part and protect the health of you and your family. Go to twc.health/justnews today and order. That's twc.health/justnews and use the promo code JUSTNEWS to save 10% off. Welcome back, America. A lot of extraordinary developments across the world every day in the Trump presidency. Today, no different. Israel, just a short while ago, announcing it is dropping all tariffs against the United States. Another win for President Trump's tariff policies. There's a lot else going on in Congress. We thought we'd turn to one of the freshest and newest voices in Congress. He's already making a huge impact there. Congressman Riley Moore from the great state of West Virginia. Congressman, good to have you on the show.
Hey, John, Amanda, thanks so much for having me on.
Great honor. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. I want to start with the announcement today with Israel. Every day we're seeing these tariffs beginning to return more investments back to the American people, whether it's companies returning jobs and plants back to America or tariffs dropping. Your thoughts on what happened today?
Well, the president has been executing this really flawlessly, and we just saw this with Israel, which certainly, look, Israel is one of our strongest allies. We all know that, but we do have to rebalance trade here in the world. We run trade deficits with literally every country on the face of the planet. And the president is trying to rebalance that and actually, for once, put the American worker first. And that's what he has promised. That's what he ran on. And this is just another example of him executing on his campaign promises and actually delivering, which is unfortunately in short supply today in the political environment we live in.
Congressman, the unfortunate reality of tariffs is that Americans pay for it. They will experience a little bit of a surge in a lot of goods that they purchase, but a lot of businesses will be repatriated back to the United States. But what is it, $5 trillion worth of investment we're up to now? However, that $5 trillion investment does help on the back end. So while Americans feel like they're paying a little bit more at the grocery store, explain to our audience how that $5 trillion investment back into the country helps them economically.
Well, there's a couple ways that helps. One thing to think about and to keep in mind is that wages in this country have been stagnant for decades. And why has it been stagnant? It's because we've been exporting all of our good manufacturing jobs overseas. So the middle class has continued to contract and collapse over those decades. And Americans have seen their buying power relative to inflation just dwindle and become smaller and smaller. So with greater buying power in the economy, every American is essentially getting a raise as these new jobs start to come back. Now, secondarily to that is that in these tariffs where we're reciprocal tariffs. The point here is for them to bring their tariffs down as we have ratcheted up, then we're all going to start to bring them down and create more free but also fair trade for the United States. So that's going to spur the economy and the manufacturing base here in the United States, as we're now going to have more access to international markets all over the country instead of it just being a one-way street, which it has been for so long.
Essentially restoring fair and free trade by using the tariffs to get there. It's remarkable. I think Treasury Secretary Bessent coined the term the dirty 15%. Donald Trump is really focusing on those who have a great relationship with us, but then punish us on the back end in their country. That seems pretty targeted and strategic, isn't it?
It is. And look, one way to think about this, and we've heard people say, oh, you know, this is going to spark a trade war. Well, the American workers been living in a trade war for over 40 years, and they've seen their jobs be decimated. Like in my state of West Virginia, where just last year, because the Biden administration would not implement tariffs on tin plate steel that was being dumped into the market by China and Canada and some other countries, we lost 1,000 jobs in my district, gone. And we had to idle that steel plant. That's not putting the American worker first. It's not putting America first. So President Trump is the first person in my lifetime who is really trying to reset this table and put us in a good position to be able to succeed here as a country. We have to do everything we can to grow and expand the middle class and provide that opportunity that had been promised to so many generations before us.
Sir, I want to shift gears to something that you introduced regarding visas for CCP visas. I love the name. Tell us about it.
Yes, well, a shocking number for your audience to think about is the amount of Chinese nationals that are in our country on student visas. 300,000 Chinese nationals are here right now in the United States on student visas. And what we have found is that there are a number of cases, and I'm sure it happens all the time and we don't even catch them, but where we've seen these students who are on these visas spying on the United States. Just here recently, we had 5 students that were spying on a joint exercise in between the U.S. military and the Taiwanese, live fire exercise that they were spying up there in Michigan and the Great Lakes. We've had individuals who've been arrested stealing U.S. technology at our research institute. We also had an individual who was on a visa from China, who was the leader of the pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas movement at UCLA, at one of our universities, so also destabilizing our campuses here in the United States. What this bill does is says no more. We're not doing this anymore. We're stopping all visas for Chinese nationals here in the United States. And something else to keep in mind, there's only a few hundred Americans who are studying in China currently. So there's another imbalance for you. And we're just getting taken advantage of across the board. So why would we open ourselves up to this? I don't remember us having 300,000 Soviets studying here during the Cold War. China is our near peer threat in the world, and we need to act like that.
Yeah, so important. You hail from one of the most naturally beautiful states in America, but also one of its most naturally endowed. So many great resources and energy resources there. The EPA has consistently, since Lee Zeldin took over in early February, rolling back regulations that were suffocating America's ability to power its future, particularly a future that's going to rely heavily on AI. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing at EPA and what it may mean not only for your state, but for all energy consumers in America.
Well, what Administrator Zeldin is doing is great news for everybody in the United States and frankly, the world. I mean, what I want to see is the U.S. is not just a country that is energy independent, but an energy superpower. And what I mean by that, a net exporter of energy. So we're able to leverage our position around the world with our energy resources, not always just using our military to protect our interests and equities abroad, but also using our energy resources to do the same thing, and then also helping our allies with those resources around the globe. And look, this is going to unleash the American economy. State of West Virginia, we have over 1,000 years of natural gas reserves just below our feet The problem is that prior to Lee Zeldin taking over in the Biden administration, the EPA was really treated like a terrorist organization in my state that we've been fighting against every time a Democrat gets in the White House, which has been crushing our jobs and our economy. And we've not been able to get those natural resources out and be able to power this economy here in the United States and reap those tax benefits that we get from the minerals and gas, which is extracted. So Lee Zeldin is doing a wonderful job. He's doing a tremendous job. I was just over at the EPA with him just last month, and I look forward to working with him in the future.
Congressman, before we let you go, the business of the House, which includes President Trump's agenda, is on ice until after Easter. How can Republicans still keep up the progress so when they get back, they can hit the ground running?
Well, I know the Speaker of the House is going to kind of reconfigure how we're going to do things next week. He spoke about that a little bit. I think you're going to see a rule likely attached to a budget bill. And we're going to see, do we want to move forward on the president's agenda or do we not? And I think that's going to be the question that's going to be put before the body. And obviously, I'm in support of the president's agenda, and we just need to go ahead and move forward on that.
Common sense all around. Sir, what a great honor it is to have you on the show. You're doing such great work. I know you've only been here a few months, but you're already making a great mark in the town. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much. God bless.
Yeah, great honor. Thank you, sir. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, a lot more news to get to right after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody. As we love to do, we have a breaking news alert straight from John Solomon. Delivered this news to me that Hunter Biden has agreed to
give up his law license in Washington, D.C. As you know, he was convicted of crimes in 2 federal courts, one involving guns, other involving Texas. His father pardoned him at the end. Joe Biden pardoned him at the end, but that doesn't absolve him of the issues related to his law license. He surrendered his law license as part of a deal. Justin News has a copy of that agreement up on the site, as well as a story. You can go check that out. That's a little breaking news.
On justthenews.com. Check it out. Yeah, all right, everybody. Now, let's move on to Wisconsin because those voters have been heading to the polls all day today for a very crucial state Supreme Court election that could shape the future of the state's judicial system for years to come and policy in that state. And in Florida, 2 congressional seats are up for grabs. So joining us now to discuss all of that, the director of Big Data Poll, Rich Bears. Rich, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me as always, man. It's good to be here.
Good to see you. All right. So are we looking at a yin and yang scenario, a happy and sad scenario between Florida and Wisconsin? How are you feeling?
Potentially. Wisconsin's a tough nut to crack for Republicans in the offseason. It has been in the last 5 Supreme Court state elections. We've seen that. Brian Hagedorn got 2 bites of the apple, and he was able to pull one by the skin of his teeth. The bottom line is that a lot of this has to do with the changing coalitions and Republicans once upon a time benefiting from off-cycle elections with their higher propensity voters coming out to vote, older, educated voters. Well, all of that is upside down now. That being said, there seems to be a higher turnout than most pollsters who polled this race expected. And that always makes for a polling miss. So if you model this at a 35% turnout, you're probably going to be wrong because all of the reports indicate that this will be a lot higher turnout than expected, which does give Republicans a lot of hope. The higher the turnout, the better it will be for the Republican candidate or aligned Republican candidate.
Right.
Great points. Great point. All right, Florida. I think there was a lot of scaring going on over the weekend, but I never believed that either one of these very red districts were in trouble. You think Republicans walk away victorious on the open seats?
Yes, sir. I think that poll we saw last week was a fundraising ploy. I'm just, that's the nicest way I could possibly put it. Sometimes candidates will do that. They'll get out a poll that shows that it's closer than expected, or maybe even that they're down. And it really is a push to the donors to say, look, we're at a fundraising disadvantage. We need a last shot in the arm. And then also there is the issue that the president did give Fine a last-minute tele-rally. But the bottom line is it's Florida, and we have got to stop falling for this every time. It's not the Florida of 04 anymore, or 08, or even 12, or 16 for that matter. John, I mean, this is a state that has seen a dramatic uptick in Republican voters from other areas of the country and exacerbated by the shift among non-whites, particularly certain subgroups of Hispanics. that make the Republican advantage almost impossible to overcome. Republicans would have to basically not vote. And we can see today from the voting data, which is fantastic in Florida. Florida is the gold standard for the administration of elections. We can see that they are, in fact, voting.
Great.
I want to ask you about what this means for midterms, which are next year. I cannot even believe that we are literally already talking about midterms, but it has to be a part of the conversation because I think this could augur what's to come. The polling seems to indicate that Republicans could hold the majority and expand it. What do you think?
I think that special elections are hyped up a lot. And, every time we get into these off-cycle years, especially in certain states and at certain levels of office. So a state Supreme Court race is not going to be as important to the low propensity voter as voting for their congressman or their senator who may be up for re-election in a midterm election. So the predictive value of these off-cycle results is debatable at best. But I would also say that it is something Republicans, it's a challenge, what I was talking about before with the change in the coalition. It is going to be a challenge for them to make sure they get out these low propensity Trump voters, but it can happen. And we often talk about these things as if it's just defined in stone. And the truth is, Truman had the same thing. Roosevelt had the same thing. It didn't mean that it has always been like this. They came out for them, right? And they came out for their candidates. So it's just something the Republican Party has to adapt to. It's not something that's written in stone.
Yeah, great point. Rich, I want to just talk about the messaging of the parties right now. Donald Trump has to message tariffs. He's got Liberation Day tomorrow. That's a big moment. I don't think most Americans understand the unfair advantage we have in places like, or unfair disadvantage we have in places like Canada, which charges 200% tariffs on milk. And then Democrats, I'm not sure what their message is other than go, Cory, go. Just stay talking on the Senate floor because that's about the only thing they got going. What do you see going on, and has there been any change in the message that you've detected?
Democrats have to gin up some kind of excitement because their behavior and their policy positions their behavior is outrageous and their policy positions are stale. There's actually a great piece by Alex Castellanos, and he argues that the Democrats' world is gone. It's a thing of the past, and they're still acting as if that voters live in that world with them, and they don't. So Cory Booker's doing whatever he can to excite people. Right now, with the tariffs, this is a big day for the president tomorrow and the entire agenda, because there are some groups in the electorate that don't understand the nuances of tariffs. John, if you poll the Mid-Atlantic or the Rust Belt states and you talk to voters about this, they tend to be more savvy because those trade imbalances hurt them a great deal more than other areas around the country, or at least they remember. It's more generational. So it really does. It really does differ if you're going to pull the state of Wisconsin or you're going to pull the state of Pennsylvania compared to a state like Arizona, for instance. So the message tomorrow will have a big impact, and he should and he better knock it out of the park because the message should be simple. That the left and the globalists, whatever you want to call them, they gave you a short-term drug to make you feel good, and now you got to wean off of it, and your body will be healthier for it. Essentially, is the way you have to explain it to them, and they'll come along with you if they get it. But they just have to know, and they have to understand why you're doing what you're doing, and they'll stick with you if you convey that, which is what he has to do tomorrow.
Yeah, I feel like Democrat voters would have a lot of grace, or former Democrat voters would have a lot of grace for their party if they came out and said, look, we weren't right on these things. We're going to pivot and go in a more common sense direction.
Very right.
Yeah. Rich Barris, Director of Big Data Poll. Always a pleasure having you here. Thanks so much for all that information.
Anytime. Thanks for having me. All the best.
Same to you. All right, everybody. One last look at what's going to be happening in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race today with Wisconsin GOP Chairman Brian Schimming. Welcome back, everybody. It's the last segment of the show, so we want to continue the focus on Wisconsin Supreme Court election, and who better to do that with than the chairman of the Wisconsin Republican Party, Brian Schimming. Sir, thank you so much for being here. Good to see you again.
So great to be with both of you. It never gets quiet in Wisconsin, does it? I always tell people, I've been on the road across the state the last couple of weeks, and I always tell folks, we were one of the top 7 states, in the presidential, kind of the big 7. And And, you know, it was really that. It was 7 states. And so, fortunately, election night, just because of timing, we were the state that put President Trump over the 270, needed to win. But really, in many ways, John and Amanda, this race is as big as that one. Because the truth of the matter is, if the conservative Brad Schimmel doesn't beat the liberal Susan Crawford today, it puts 2 congressional seats here in Wisconsin in play. A liberal court in Wisconsin, you can quote me on this forever, a liberal court in Wisconsin will undo Wisconsin's congressional maps to take 2 Republican congressmen out. No doubt in my mind about it. A appeal will be filed on that map within weeks.
Wow.
And just for Wisconsin voters to kind of understand who Susan Crawford is, I don't regret that sentence. That is what she said when asked if she regrets sentencing a child rapist to just 4 years in prison. He was back on the streets in just 2 years. This is what Wisconsinites can expect from liberals in that state. Is that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As you both know, I'm an actual Republican from Madison, Wisconsin. And apparently Berkeley was full. And so he ended up in Madison, Wisconsin. And I will tell you, she is maybe, if not one of the most left-wing judge ever to run for Supreme Court in Wisconsin. On repeated occasions, Amanda, to your point, she has exercised lenient sentencing well below what the prosecutors recommended on some of the most heinous sex crimes or crimes against children, in the county's history. So we know what we're getting if we elect her to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. We have a small court, or a 7-member Supreme Court, 10-year terms. And so when we have a Supreme Court election in Wisconsin, that's the gift that keeps on giving. That stays for a long time. If she wins tomorrow, if she wins today, election day here in Wisconsin, the court will be locked in liberal for the next 3 years, and there will be nothing left.
Yeah, the stakes are so high. That's why I think Elon Musk said the destiny of humanity may be decided by this race. He's put it in pretty robust terms. I want to talk a little bit about the role that outside money has played in Wisconsin. Obviously, Elon Musk trying to come to the Republicans' defense, George Soros, the liberals on the far side. What do you think Musk's appearance in Green Bay did to energize the base in the last 48 hours?
It's interesting, of course, as you know, the president had endorsed Brad Schimmel last week personally. Right. He was not in the state, but he did a teletown hall for Brad. So it was very clear that the president supported Brad Schimmel. And Elon Musk's appearance here in Green Bay, Wisconsin in the last 48 hours certainly fired that up. Probably fires up some liberals, too. They don't love Elon Musk. I guess you can't save enough astronauts or save enough taxpayer money or reposition satellites to help revolutions in other countries. That doesn't count when you're Elon Musk. So the truth is, I think it fires up our base, probably does a little firing up of their base as well. But to that point, that's what this gets to, John and Amanda. This is what this gets to. You're not going to find a lot of voters in the middle on this thing. President Trump won Wisconsin with about 1.7 million votes last November. If you're a Trump voter in Wisconsin, you need to vote by 8 o'clock tonight, just 8 o'clock Wisconsin time tonight, just a few hours away. And I always say, I got asked, I was doing a lot of rallies, speaking at a lot of rallies the last week, and people asked me what they could do. And I was like, number one, you can vote yourself. But number two, the biggest weapon that you have to help out Brad Schimmel at this point is in your pocket. It's your cell phone. Go into your cell phone, go into your contacts. There's nobody that's watching us right now that doesn't have at least 5 or 10 people on their contact list that they can't pick up the phone and say, I need you to do this. We need to do this.
Sir, I don't want to shorten your thought, but I want to make sure we get to the question of election integrity in Wisconsin. Very important, voter ID. What is that looking like?
So far, okay. Actually, we haven't had a lot of reports. We've had some. We've dealt with over 100 reports. The state Republican Party has an EI hotline. So we've dealt with about 100 issues, most of them relatively small. Actually, one of the biggest issues today, Amanda, is we had an ice storm up north, and there were parts
goodness.
of 10 counties.
Well, we hope that
did not
everybody
have
there is
power.
safe. I know. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. All right, Wisconsin GOP Chair Brian Schimming always keeping us up to date on everything that's always happening in that state.